ISIL claims responsibility for a deadly attack in Paris as France prepares for the first round of voting in the presidential election. The UN Security Council condemns that failed missile launch by the Democratic People's Republic of Korea as tensions rise between Washington and Pyongyang. And he's described Iran's nuclear agreement as the worst deal ever. Now, US President Donald Trump is reviewing the US decision to lift economic sanctions. Hello, I'm Arnold Naidu in Washington, D.C., and this is The Heat. Paris is dealing with another suspected terrorist attack after a gunman opened fire on police officers on Thursday night on the Champs-Élysées. Several presidential candidates cancelled events on Friday but vowed the election would go on as scheduled on Sunday. For more on this story, we turn to our distinguished panel. Joining us now from Paris is Leela Jacinto. She's a news reporter with France 24. Also with us from Beijing is Qinduo Xu. He's a political analyst with China Radio International. Becker is director of the anti-war and civil rights activist group Answer Coalition here in Washington, D.C. And from New York, we're joined by Gianno Caldwell. He's a Republican strategist and founder of Caldwell Strategic Consulting. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Leela, let me start with you. Just days before the election, France is hit with another terror attack. How do you think this is going to play out in the election on Sunday?
Well, there's a difference between how are the voters going to react and how are the candidates going to react. The candidates have reacted somewhat predictably. For the far-right candidate, Marine Le Pen, she has seized this. She was actually running a pretty weak platform on economics. She was getting trapped a lot, and now this attack brings her on the ground that she really wants to talk about. The center-right candidate, François Fillon, this is also going to play well for his stuff on terrorism issue, his platform. As for French voters, I really don't know. France is no stranger to terrorist attacks since 2015. This attack was in a major venue in Paris, and it was just days before the election, but it was not a very deadly attack. It's a tragic incident, but I think a lot of French people have decided where they stand on the issue of terrorism.
Leela, as you point out, France is no stranger to terrorist attacks. How big has national security been during this election campaign?
This election campaign has been like no other election campaign in France's history. National security was not very high. It would come on the agenda, it would wax and wane. But it was primarily unemployment and the future of the European Union that actually dominated this campaign. But of course, now national security, we've been, this morning, we've had all the candidates come out with their statements. However, by midnight today, there's going to be an end to campaigning. So pretty much whatever the candidates want to say, they've got to say it. They've got a few hours left, and then the campaigning stops before the polls open on Sunday.
Brian, we've seen something of a populist wave sweeping across the world. Do you think France is just about to join that wave?
It is indeed. You see the center collapsing and the left and the right growing. The surprising advance of Jean-Luc Mélenchon from the left, very strong left, hard left, who was considered a non-entity in the campaign just a few weeks ago. He's surging within a few percentage points. And of course, you have Marine Le Pen representing the dominant part of extremes. That is the right-wing populist movement that we could see as evidenced by Brexit last year and now triggered by Theresa May in the snap election that's coming up. Same thing that's going on in the United States with the Trump campaign. A surge of right-wing populism, but I also think with Mélenchon and like Bernie Sanders, a surge of left-wing populism. That, I think, portends where world politics is actually going, at least in the Western countries.
At the extremes, right?
At the extremes, because, of course, the economic immiseration of big parts of the population, as our guest said from France, it is about the economy. It is in the United States. 1 out of every 2 people in this, the richest country in the world, live either in poverty or near poverty. In the case of France, big parts of the traditional French working class are now suffering. Same in England. So, of course, that leads to the rise of left and right populism.
Let me go to Gianno in New York. Gianno, when we look at some of the issues here, it seems that they are the same election issues on both sides of the Atlantic. Marine Le Pen has also been very tough on immigrants. She's, espoused an anti-immigrant, anti-globalization strategy. Let's take a listen to some of what she had to say.
For lots of French people, mass immigration is oppressive. Mass immigration is not an opportunity for France. It's a tragedy for France.
So we're hearing sentiments there, Gianno, that are very similar to President Trump. Are you surprised that she, in this instance, wants to put France first?
No, I'm not. I mean, the nationalism, I think, is something that's sweeping not just the country, but the world in and of itself. And considering the fact that this was a terrorist act that just occurred over in Paris, which I think most folks aren't considering to be as big of a deal, considering what they experienced not that long ago when the Obama administration was in power, I think the people of France are very, very concerned, especially considering Ms. Le Pen has made mention of there's about 10,000 individuals on a terrorist watch list over there in France, and nothing is being done about it. They're just sitting there waiting. So when you have those kind of considerations that you can't even walk outside your house without thinking about being safe, that's an issue that could be a real winner, especially considering an event happened so close to the election cycle. The media has been talking about it, including in the U.S. and all over the world. That's something that's going to probably tip the scales in her favor.
So do you think that one act, one person involved here could actually change the outcome of the election?
If she is talking about it in the right terms, if she's saying, look, this is one act, but there's 10,000 other, if not more, potential acts that can occur because we have a terrorist watch list that no one is doing anything about. I think if you're talking about that and you're talking about other instances of terrorism, this election goes from a race on economics and unemployment to terrorism.
Leela, you agree?
Partly, not all of it. One is there have been several plots that have been thwarted, and we have a very heightened security presence. It's called Operation Sentinel, and we have seen in a number of cases there was an attempted attack at the Louvre, at the Champs-Élysées. What we are seeing right now is it is true that from 2013 to around 2015, the security situation was in shambles. But now we are actually seeing the results of these heightened security measures. It is absolutely true that there are a number of people on we call it the S file, and the profile of the attacker yesterday is very much fitting this profile. But, the rhetoric that France is doing nothing is not washing down as well in 2017 as it was, say 2 or 3 years ago.
Brian?
I have to disagree with your New York guest. I mean, we have Marine Le Pen and Donald Trump, I would say, opportunistically taking advantage of a tragedy. Yes, people died. Yes, people are dying all the time. But what we really see witnessed here in France, Marine Le Pen or Donald Trump at home, is the use of terror incidents, small in number, to generate hatred against immigrants, hatred against Muslims. Does that decrease and make the country safer? Does that decrease the problem of violence? Or does it escalate resentment and the cycle of violence? The politicians, the right wing, are playing a dangerous game, a dangerous game.
Okay, Gianno, I want to get a quick response, then I've got to get to Beijing. Go ahead, Gianno.
I disagree with that wholeheartedly. I think what your D.C. guest just mentioned is the same thing that President Obama did, if we're going to take it to U.S. politics, where you ignore the facts that are actually happening on the ground, when you ignore the fear that people are actually experiencing, when you ignore that so many people are concerned about the safety of their own and their friends, you put yourself in a situation where terrorism can really be exploited in the way that terrorists come in and they really wreak havoc on the country or in a community. So you can decimate a community because you're not providing the level of gravitas in which the situation deserves.
Okay, I want to go to Qinduo to get the view from Beijing. Qinduo, here we have France, which is a key member of the European Union. It's also one of the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council. How does China view this election?
Well, I think China is mostly concerned about the result, whether the right-wing candidate, Le Pen, will win the election. That would be a signal of basically European countries are turning right in the rise of the nationalism, the rise of populism, protectionism. And then this is the mentality of inward looking, the rise of the sentiment of anti-globalization, anti-free trade. So that's no good to China. That's not good to Europe. That's and also, if there there's a Frexit with the election victory of Le Pen, then that would be the end of the European Union. So that would be a big change, not only for European countries, but also for the whole world, I would say.
Okay, I want to turn now to the next issue on today's show, and that is the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, the missile test there, the nuclear test there. Qinduo, let me stay with you. Senior officials here in the United States, including the president, now saying that China is working with the United States and other countries to resolve this crisis. But are tensions still running very high in the region?
Yes, absolutely. I think, there is a kind of a lull, kind of a dying down, but this is temporary dying down of the tension, because of also partly because of distraction about whereabouts about the U.S. Carl Vinson aircraft carrier, the misleading miscommunication problem. But remember, upcoming on Tuesday would be this anniversary of North Korean military. So that could be the window opportunity for them to launch another missile test. So if there is a test, probably, I guess you can expect the U.S. will try to shoot down the missile. Then you would expect retaliation from North Korean side, and then artillery will have the Seoul, the capital city of South Korea, within their range. So that would be escalation of military conflicts. Nobody knows, what direction that will go.
Brian, the United States Vice President Mike Pence has addressed this DPRK issue this week. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
History will attest the soldier does not bear the sword in vain. And those who would challenge our resolve or our readiness should know we will defeat any attack and meet any use of conventional or nuclear weapons with an overwhelming and effective American response.
When you listen to that, when you look at that, do you get the feeling we've been here before?
Oh, my goodness. Mike Pence is reading from a well-worn script here, a politician who never served in the military, putting on the bombardier jacket, going to the DMZ, going on the U.S. aircraft carriers, talking tough, talking about the sword is at the ready, U.S. resolve should not be tested, blah, blah, blah. And I think what we're seeing right now is that the Trump administration has found the formula to mute his critics at home, even the liberal Democratic Party critics or those in the CNN or mainstream media. If you strike Syria, bomb Syria, go to war or nearly go to war in North Korea, suddenly you become very presidential. That's apparently the criteria for being a president in the United States. But the fact of the matter is, DPRK left the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and began building nuclear weapons in 2002 when George W. Bush decided to label North Korea, along with Iran and Iraq, the part of the axis of evil while he was preparing to invade Iraq, which had been disarmed. And the DPRK drew the conclusion, we're not going to let that happen to us, and they began to pursue and develop nuclear weapons. Right now, the U.S. will never make them a non-nuclear power. What it could do is cap nuclear weapons in North Korea in exchange for real dialogue, real negotiations, bilateral talks, and a peace treaty ending the Korean War once and for all. But the Trump administration, right now at least, isn't indicating that. Perhaps behind the scenes there can be some progress on that.
Gianno, what do you make of this? If the vice president goes around, he's in the region, he's talking about all options on the table. We just saw the United States launch cruise missiles on Syria, and shortly afterwards they dropped that massive ordnance bomb on Afghanistan. If you take all of those things, what do you make of this?
I take it that we're finally being decisive in our decision-making. I can tell you that much. I think when it comes to North Korea and what President Trump is doing, because a lot of people, some of his critics and even some of his supporters, have tried to make him out to be what is called a neocon, someone who really loves war. In that sense, I disagree. Given the fact that he said, look, we're going to allow for China, which has close economic ties with North Korea, to solve the issue for us. And it looks as though China is actually looking to do that by putting their military on high alert, gives me a great sense of peace that we're not necessarily jumping into a situation before we really know what's all at stake. Now, with that being said, President Trump is unlike any other president that we've had, Obama, Bush, or anybody else, because he's not letting anyone in on his plans, right? So he's saying, look, I'm not going to tip my hand and let everyone know what I'm going to do. I'm just going to allow for our military to do its work, which is pretty interesting for me, and maybe in some cases it's a little unsettling, considering the fact that we're used to hearing what the plans are and debating them and providing our take and analysis. But at this point, it's China's issue, and China is looking to solve it. And if they don't, we'll probably get involved. But at this point, I'm comfortable with the actions moving forward.
Let me go to Qinduo. Qinduo, let's look at what the Chinese are doing. China is pursuing a diplomatic solution here. Here's the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman, Lu Kang.
In the recent contact between us and the major parties concerned in the nuclear issue on the Korean Peninsula, they all said they don't want to see any conflict or war. In fact, most members of the international community hope for peace. So we hope all parties concerned can reach a consensus and make real efforts to achieve this goal.
So, Qinduo, the question is, can China get the DPRK to the negotiation table?
Well, good question, Adam. I think I want to just remind our listeners or viewers about against an overestimation of what China can do. A lot of people expect China to do to basically control and order North Korea to dismantle its nuclear weapons and then come back to negotiating table. I think this is overestimate. No, I'm not sure China can do that. And also, people should not underestimate the determination of North Koreans to possess the nuclear weapons. As one of our guests said earlier, if they take a look at the fate to Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi, of course, they know having a nuclear bomb probably is the only way to protect themselves from whatever a regime change or the country being invaded. So there's a big problem. Yes, China will help, and because that's also in China's interest. But it's really a question of how far China can go, and how much China can do, or whatever China does here. But North Korea probably will be stuck and following their own principle and not to basically submit to the pressure.
Okay, we're going to have to take a break right now. After that, we'll explore the Trump administration's foreign policy and some of this week's top stories in Washington. Stay with us. You're watching The Heat.